Hey guys, it's time for another series review, and today we're going to be looking at a really just underrated series that I like, and it's Yakuza. Now, Yakuza is a massive series, and it's so big, in fact, that I'm actually going to split this series review into two parts. So this is part one of the Yakuza series, where we'll be covering Yakuza 1 through 3, or as I like to think of them as, the Kiryu-only games. So, let's start with the first Yakuza for the PS2. So here we have the first Yakuza game, released only on the PS2 for now. While Yakuza 1 was remade on the PS3 and even the Wii U, those versions were not released in America. And more about the PS4 version later. But I'll be looking at the only version in America right now, which is the PS2 version. So Yakuza gets the series started with Kazuma Kiryu. He is the Yakuza for his clan. His GF Yumi, however, is harassed and fucked by some big clan leader dude. Kazuma's best friend at the time is Nishiki. Now, Nishiki kills the dude who basically fucked with Yumi. Kazuma shows up and decides to take the fall for Nishiki, as the Yakuza will be after him and he didn't want Nishiki going to jail. So Kazuma takes the fall. Kazuma is in jail for 10 years. After Kazuma gets out though, some real shit has changed. Yumi is gone missing, Nishiki basically isn't friends with Kazuma anymore, and the big thing is that 10 billion yen has gone missing from the head of the Yakuza clan. Apparently this little girl named Haruka is connected to the money. That's all I'm saying about the plot here. The plot is like the central focus of the game and the best part of the game, so I'm not going to spoil anymore. Yakuza's story is really strong here, but the strongest part is the characters. The characters in Yakuza are fantastic and are as good as they come. Kazuma is just a total badass in this game, and he's just awesome in this game. He's just fun, and Kazuha is just, I love playing as Kazuha, and the other characters really bring the story together as a whole, and the plot is not only intriguing and complex, but it's really actually well put together, and it's the whole reason I recommend you play the game, really, is for the story. It's that good. But now it's time for the gameplay. The first Yakuza game, to say it's rough around the edges would be an understatement. The game takes place in Kamurocho, a Tokyo-esque city. This place is pretty big, as he's on foot the whole game. And there is two types of gameplay. There is the adventure type mode and the battle type mode. The adventure type mode sees the player exploring Kamurocho and interacting with characters and the world. In this mode, the game is totally open. You can interact with really any person in the city, and there's a bunch of stores. The game is like Pokemon in a sense, where you're just exploring around, completing objectives, talking to people, and getting in random encounters. The city is fun to explore, and it's Christmas time also. There is even mini games in this world and a shooter part of the game. However, sooner or later you will encounter someone who wants to just beat your ass. Actually, really, that's like everybody in really just all the Yakuza games. You'll encounter someone who just wants to beat your ass. Everyone wants to fight Kazuha for some reason or another. The combat in this game is a beat 'em up, basically. Kazuha has a standard attack and a heavy attack. The heavy attack will always end the combo, though. Kazuma can block and grab his opponents. Now, in the game, there is a heat meter. The heat meter fills up from doing combos and attacks that the player does. Once the bar fills up enough, the player will have heat. Heat is used to perform context-sensitive actions that do a ton of damage. But at the beginning of the game, I will say there really isn't any heat moves at all. Kazuma can also use weapons like umbrellas, signs, etc. The enemies in the game are pretty much all thugs. Yakuza gangs, mafia thugs, all thugs. And like every Japanese game, the fat people have significantly more health than the normal dude. After finishing every battle, the player will get XP, like an RPG, and you can get upgrades to learn more moves, get more health, and use heat more efficiently. And Kazuma's health does not regenerate in this game. The only way to get it is by eating food, going to a safe house, or finishing a chapter. Now, while the combat sounds all fine and dandy, well, it would be if the combat just wasn't so ass. The combat I have a serious problem with, but I'm going to come back later to where I talk about things I dislike about the game.
Go! Kill this arrogant motherfucker!
The presentation in Yakuza is very good. The game looks pretty good for 2005 and is a late PS2 game. The animation is pretty decent but can appear a bit stiff. The character models look really good though. The city looks pretty fantastic though, that quality cannot be denied. The textures all look good. The game has really good music also, like really good music. Like I freaking love the music in this game. It's fantastic, honestly. It's mostly rock, but it's very good. The music is easily the best part of the presentation. The music is just kick-ass awesome. I listen to this shit like at least once a week. The music in the first Yakuza is awesome. Now there is the voice acting in the game. Now this is the only Yakuza game to ever be released with English voice acting. And yeah, it's not that great. Mark Hamill is even in the game, and he's great, but like everyone else is pretty so-so. Like some stuff in this game is just so awkward, like the swearing, which there is a lot of in this game. The voice acting isn't like bad, but it's not great, and the suits at SEGA didn't think it was good at all, so this is the only game with a dub. So I mean, it's interesting to go back and watch, but especially as if you've played through all the games now, it's really interesting to watch, but it's really not that good, the dub. There's a reason they got rid of it. So while all the presentation and the gameplay sounds pretty dandy, I want to go over the things that I don't like about Yakuza 1. Now Yakuza 1, when it comes to music, the graphics, and the soundtrack, I have no problems. It's really fantastic on like every level, especially for the time. But the gameplay I have some serious problems with. First off is the game is not seamless at all. When Kazuma goes off screen in the main world, when he goes off screen in the main world, the game just like freezes up for like a few seconds, and it does this all the time. It's not even like my disc. The game, it just gets really annoying. The next thing is the load times in this game are terrible. They aren't like retardedly long, they're like 15 seconds, which doesn't sound too horrible, but the problem is they're like everywhere. Like everywhere. Holy crap, there's so many load times. Okay, now we get to my main problem with the game though. Those last two aren't huge problems, but this one is huge. The combat. Oh my god, the combat. The combat in this game is the main reason why I can't recommend it. The combat in this game is, it's so infuriating. The combat is stiff, unresponsive, clunky, and that's just an understatement. This game has a few key issues with the combat. First off is the lock-on in this game is just total garbage. I didn't even think it was a lock-on, it was so bad, but online it says it is. It might as well not be, because the lock-on is just awful in this game. The two main issues though I have with the combat is the camera and the fact that Kazuma can't change directions mid-combo. Now the camera, oh my god, the camera, holy shit. This is like the worst fucking camera on the planet. If you thought Bubsy 3D was bad, well, it's not that bad, but this game is pretty bad. The camera is terrible. The game constantly fights Kazuma, like constantly. It constantly does not go where you want it, and readjusting it doesn't seem to do anything at all. It will try on purpose to get the worst angle with the worst view. Like, what the fuck? I got so pissed off at this camera because it's shit just so often. What a piece of shit camera, where it tries to get the worst camera angle and it decides to switch randomly all the fucking time like it's Resident Evil. And when it does, every time Kazuma is facing like the wrong way. So it's just annoying as fuck. I mean, like, what camera tries to be as bad as possible and hide all the enemies from the player? Like, it hides the enemies from the player multiple times. What is the point of this view? You know what? Fuck this. Then there is not being able to change direction mid-combo. This is a massive flaw. Now, the old Dynasty Warriors games had this problem, where you actually couldn't change direction mid-combo. It was a problem there, but those games came out in the early 2000s. Not the mid-2000s. They got it down even in Dynasty Warriors. Not this game, though. It's shit. Once Kazuma starts going in a combo, he'll be going in that direction, or you stop the combo. It's that simple. Now, why is this the worst fucking thing on the planet? Well, you'll get surrounded by dudes, and they will all be punching you, and you can't get them all. Just one at a time, unless you get them in a line. Then you can get them. Also, towards the end of the game, the enemies just love to strafe around you. Now, Kazuma can strafe also, but the enemies can change direction mid-combo. If you're attacking an enemy and he strafes to, say, the right, you have to stop the combo, then you have to start it over on the dude. Also, Kazuma turns very slowly for an action game, and it can be annoying as fuck. Really, the combat was just incredibly irritating, because you'll get your ass beat by a bunch of dudes, and you can't do shit, because you can't change fucking direction, or you can't fucking see them, because the camera's shit. It's so annoying. There is a lot of bosses in Yakuza 1, and really, like, so many of them are just bleh. They have a shitload of health, and they just want to kick your teeth in. Some of them aren't that bad. But Majima, oh, Goro Majima, one of the main characters of the series. Don't even get me started. Like, really, don't even get me started. The first fight with him, I thought was actually pretty good. It could be a little annoying, but I thought it was pretty good. The second fight with them, though, is hard as shit. Majima is an expert at strafing and rolling, and you'll never get a full combo in on him. It is ridiculous. I hated this boss fight so much. Don't get me wrong, I love Majima. He's like my favorite character in the series, but his fight in Yakuza 1, the second one in particular, was just annoying as hell. And I am certain in the remakes, like, if you could change direction, you can change direction in the remakes of Yakuza 1. Yeah, the PS3 one and the Wii U one I brought up, you can change direction mid-combo in the remakes, the ones not released in America. So that fight would be excellent. The controls really just ruined the entire game for me. Because of the combat not being that great, like, alone, I cannot fully recommend Yakuza 1 to everyone. Like, just on that alone. All in all, I think Yakuza 1, though, is an okay game. Despite the issues, like the combat, it isn't the worst. It's not very good, but it's not the worst. But the story, the characters, and really the music keep this game together. I could do better with less random encounters also, but I mean these just got out of control near the end of the game, and it's filler chapters, which the game does have, and which there's like one or two like chapters where it's wholly is just filler. But besides that, the game is okay. It's not really good, the game, I would say, but it's not really bad. I would just say the game is pretty average, like a 5 or 6 out of 10 if I had to rate it on a score, but I don't even do those anymore. It's just if I recommend it or not, and this game I really can't recommend that much. The story really keeps the game together. I mean, if the story was nowhere near as good, this game would probably be a mediocre to crap side of a game, but really the story just saves the game. But all in all, I can't really recommend this game unless you want to get into the whole franchise. I recommend watching the cutscenes as a lot of important themes and characters are introduced, but the combat is just so not really good at all that it just hurts the game, and Yakuza 1 is just a very mixed game. Soon after I played through this game, it was announced that Yakuza Kiwami, the PS4 remake of this game, running off Yakuza 0, the newest Yakuza game in America, it'll be running off that engine, and it's a remake of Yakuza 1 in that engine. So the PS4 remake is actually coming to America, and that makes me very excited. So I haven't even played the game, but I absolutely recommend you check out Yakuza Kiwami. It's still not out here in America, but it's coming out. I say check it out as soon as the game comes out, because that is by far the superior version of Yakuza 1. Sure, the music might not be as good, but the combat is not garbage, and the story is just as good. But for this original game, the PS2 release, really, I just can't recommend it, especially with Kiwami coming out. And I mean, while the story and the music are hella good, the gameplay just suffers heavily due to multiple different issues. So honestly, just wait for Kiwami. There's no reason to play this game now. Now, the first Yakuza game might have been really mixed like this, but trust me, the series only got a lot better after this. Yakuza 2 came out in Japan a year after the first game. However, it would be several years before it came out in the US. The game came out in 2008 on the PS2. Yeah, 2008. The PS3 had been out for 2 years at that point. No wonder the game totally bombed. It's not like the game was different either. It was literally just a translation to English. They left the Japanese voice acting in. Because of this, manufacturing of the game stopped very early, which means this game is very, very, very expensive. The game would be remade on PS3 and Wii U, actually, just like the first game, and surprise, surprise, this was never released in America, and never even put on PSN, and that's just stupid in my opinion. So, because of this, I had to resort to an emulator, and while emulators I'm okay with sometimes, I really don't like using emulators for a console I own. I'd rather just have the game, and the emulated version of Yakuza 2 has some serious problems, and I know it's not just me, as my friends played on the same emulator with the same problems. These problems include a majority of the cutscenes being very blurry for some reason, really strange lines showing up on the right and bottom sides of the screen randomly for a while. But at least you know I did record this footage. I'm not stealing it from anyone, so there's a heads up. But because of the reasons I previously mentioned, getting a hand on Yakuza 2 is not cheap, or English, unless you want it in Japanese. So Yakuza 2 takes place a year after the first game. There is obviously some spoilers that will be revealed as the game takes place after the first game, so obviously Kazuma is still alive. Kazuma is with Haruka visiting the graves of some important people from the first game, when the chairman of the Tojo clan shows up to see Kazuma. He is shot by Yakuza from the Omi Alliance. Shit hits the fan pretty much immediately. Now there needs to be a new leader of the Tojo clan, and his name is Daigo Dojima, and Kazuma wants him to be the leader. But first he must make amends with the Omi Alliance, as it was a rogue party of the Omi Alliance that killed the previous leader. They are located in Sotenbori, which is located in Osaka. That's all I'm going to say for the story. The story in Yakuza 2 actually really trumps the original. The story in Yakuza 2 is just flippin' fantastic. It is excellent. Literally all of the story of Yakuza 2 is great. The game is on a much larger scale, and the plot twists are just awesome. This is probably the best story in all the Yakuza games, and it's easily the best of all the Yakuza games with just Kiryu primarily. Well, actually, it's only Kiryu. And this is easily the best. The main antagonist, Ryuji Goda, is actually like the best antagonist in the entire franchise, and it's just totally awesome. That's all I'm going to say about the story because, like spoilers, but just know that it really is one of the best video game stories of all time. So Yakuza 2 is very similar to the first game, only improved in one big way. The combat is far superior in Yakuza 2 to Yakuza 1. Like, it's just fantastic compared to Yakuza 1. There is two gameplay styles in Yakuza 2. There is the combat and then the free roaming part. The free roaming part is exactly the same as the first game, where you're running around, random dudes bum rush you, the game still freezes every time you go off screen, and the use of items, talking to people, it's the same as the first game. There is the mini games and a bunch of little side things to do in the open world also. There is not just Kamurocho though now, there is also Sotenbori to play in. The map is also good, but it's a lot smaller, even compared to the later versions of Sotenbori. And it has a few small districts also. Really though, this is completely unchanged from Yakuza 1 in terms of gameplay. It's pretty much exactly the same. The combat though has been improved a lot. Now the biggest problem with Yakuza 1's combat was you could not change directions mid-combo. Now this has been completely addressed, and you can now. You can change directions mid-combo, and the combat is a lot smoother than before. It can still be incredibly stiff, especially in modern day when you've played, the other Yakuza games or just other beat-em-ups in general. But I got used to it eventually. The combat is just a hell of a lot more improved, and it feels better with better combos and much better heat moves. Heat moves are actually hella good in this game with some awesome moves, unlike the first game where really, until the end of the game, you didn't even have like any of the good heat moves. Like in this game, no, it's in full effect, and it is awesome. The combat is just good. I wouldn't say it's fantastic, but it's just really good, and it's just way better than the subpar fighting of the first game, and I love the heat moves in this game. Kazuma has more moves to perform, he can pick up more stuff, And really, the heat moves are just awesome. Hell, even the bosses are way better, and one boss in particular is just great. Really, that's it for the gameplay department because it plays very similar to the first game, but it is a lot more improved. You will have exploring, you'll have lots of combat, and lots of cutscenes. Now, the graphics in Yakuza 2, though, are really not that exciting. I already brought up the issues with the game on an emulator, so I can't perfectly review the graphics, but I will say it's only slightly better than Yakuza 1. The facial features are better though, that's for sure. The environments are really the same as the first game. Like, I literally mean it's the same. Like, Kamurocho is the exact same map with the exact same graphics. There's some small differences, but it's basically the same. Sotenbori is on the same level. It uses pretty much just reused assets from Kamurocho, just in a different landscape also. The character models are also the same. The animations are clearly just the same ones from Yakuza 1, and they really just reused assets from the entire first game. And I mean, it makes sense for such a low budget game, but it's still incredibly noticeable. The frame rate, though, on even on an emulator, it was fine. That rarely happens for me for some reason. I never had any actual issues at all with the frame rate. Now, while this game might look the same as the first game, or slightly better, I still think it looks okay. For 2006, it doesn't look that bad for a PS2 game. It's rough, don't get me wrong, but the game doesn't look awful. For 2008, though, yeah, the graphics are pretty piss poor, shitty. But I'm gonna excuse it this time since the game was a PS2 game. It came out in realistically 06 and not 08. And I actually really like how the game looks in terms of style. I mean, it has just a very nice style to it, in my opinion, and it looks nice. So that's why the graphics, even though they would technically be shitty, I think they look alright. Now for the sound. The dub is gone. We have the subtitles, which is fine with me. I mean, it's whatever. I'm used to it. I'm not going to act like some asshole and I'm like, oh, the voice acting is hella good, when I don't even speak Japanese. I can't comment on the voice acting. It's that simple. And the English is in the subtitles, so there you go. There's only a few grammar mistakes, luckily. The sound effects are reused from the first game, which were fine, but some are just hella good in this game. The heat moves sound fantastic. Like, on top of looking great, like, the heat moves just sound awesome. I love how they all sound. The crunch. All the effects were good. Yakuza 2 really uses a lot of the same music as Yakuza 1, but Yakuza 1 had absolutely just phenomenal music. So Yakuza 2, they took honestly the best tracks from Yakuza 1 and added a bit more, and I'm not complaining at all. I mean, the music is still 10 out of 10 god tier music. I love the music. Now, the new music for the game is about on the same level as the first game. I'm serious though when I say that Yakuza 1 and 2 have the best music, like, in the entire franchise. And some of my favorite tracks to listen to right now from video games are definitely Yakuza 1 and 2. The soundtracks make both games worth playing, or at least just listening to, because they are so great. I could just gush over these soundtracks for a lot longer, but I'm gonna just stop and say that they should be heard. And I say that for a reason. Now, when it comes to things I dislike about Yakuza 2 outside of the emulator issues that I had mentioned, there really isn't much. The game can still feel stiff and not precise during the combat, and while changing direction is there, it's not perfect. It's great, don't get me wrong, but it's not perfect. The combat still feels a bit clunky again, and maybe it's because I'm on an emulator and I'm using an Xbox One controller, but besides that, it fell off a bit. A part or two, like the first time you go to Sotenbori, is a bit confusing also as to what the hell you're supposed to do, and that happens like 2 other times where I just had to look it up because the game literally gives you no indication on what you're supposed to do. The whole weird camera angle thing really wasn't the best, and like Yakuza 1, the game stalls a second or two when you move area to area, so that just sucks, honestly. The load times aren't shit like the first game, but they aren't great either. They're just so-so. Yakuza 2 also has some really confusing minigames like Mahjong, and another one that you either pay money or you play the game, and I have no idea how to play any of these. And again, the presentation, I'm going to exclude it, as it was a 2006 game, technically in 08. But this is the only time I'm going to do this for the Yakuza games, because I actually really like the art style for the second game. But really, Yakuza 2 doesn't have a whole lot to dislike. Most of the issues I mentioned can be overlooked or might be even nitpicking, honestly. At the worst, it takes a while to get used to the somewhat clunky combat, but the story and the sound in this game is awesome. Like, this game just has it. The story is so damn good, and the music is also. The story really takes this game from being in a slightly above average game into great territory. The game shits all over Yakuza 1. Now that the game, like, it has a great story. I mean, the first game had a great story too, but this game just, like, it just comes together because the gameplay is actually good too, and the story, like, oh my god, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but I will say that while some stuff may seem a little dumb, it actually comes together really, really nice together. So Yakuza 2, I recommend much more than Yakuza 1, which I technically didn't recommend at all. And I really just wish it wasn't so expensive, because it's only on the PS2 in America, and that's the only way to play it. And so really, unless you want to pay up the ass for the game on PS2, I would recommend just playing it on an emulator. But if you're going to start with the Yakuza series, you definitely want to start with Yakuza 2. You can skip the first game. I mean, the game is a good catch-up thing for Yakuza 1, but it's totally worth the download on your computer, because it's or unless you want to pay out the ass for it, but I really doubt that. But really, I'm just going on and on. I'm rambling here. Overall, Yakuza 2 is a good game that you really should check out, and at the very least, check out the story, because that's awesome. So the next time we go, though, will be on the PS3. So it would be a little later, like 2 years later in the West, till we got Yakuza 3, which was released in 2009, I think, in Japan, and 2010 in America, so the gap was not as big as Yakuza 2's. Now, Yakuza 3 takes place a few years after Yakuza 2, and I'm trying not to spoil as much as I can here, but knowing Haruka and Kazuma are in it is basically a spoiler in itself. The game actually takes place over many years, and eventually catches up to 2009 when the game came out in Japan. Basically, Kazuma moves out of the big city to get away, and he starts an orphanage and tries to live a more honest life away from this Yakuza crap. And he lives with Haruka and a bunch of lovable kids that he watches. Basically, some local Yakuza start stuff, and there is a big government plan going on to build a resort in Okinawa, which is where he resides, which is where, like, his orphanage is, literally right where his orphanage is. There is a lot more to this plot, but I'm leaving it at that. I'll talk about how I feel about the plot in a little bit. So Yakuza 3 changes up the gameplay in a few tweaks from Yakuza 2. It's pretty much the same with the whole running around the open world area, where it's like an RPG in the combat. The game is now, though, fully third person. There's no weird angles like in the first two. You're still interacting with characters, have dialogue options, using items sometimes with other items, and being bum rushed as random encounters. The game takes place in Kamurocho again, but about a third or maybe almost even a half of the game takes place in this new environment, which is Okinawa, which it really isn't that big, but it is moderately sized. Kamurocho, though, is pretty much identical to Yakuza 2. At this point, I really actually like it being the same city, because it feels like there's a lot of history here with, like, Serena and the Millennial Tower, especially if you played through the first two games like I have. And running around in third person, though, just feels so much better also. And this is actually the last game to feature just Kazuma as the playable character, like the only one, besides, I guess, Yakuza 6 now. The combat is a lot smoother from Yakuza 2. It's really not changed at all, per se. It's just smoother and more fluid. The combat is still pretty good. Sure, some of the combos are the same, but still, it's relatively fun and relatively good. I mean, there's heat combos, grabs, everything that was there previously. There's just a bit more of it now, and there's some new stuff. Upgrading is also the same with the bar, which was the same as Yakuza 1, and it's the same here. Something I will say, though, is the heat moves in this game are just, I'm going to just be honest, the heat moves are just shit in this game. Like, don't get me wrong, they're still really important, and there's a ton to pull off, and I mean, like, it's just like how the heat moves are. Like, they don't look anywhere near as cool or as brutal like the second game. Sure, they do a bunch of damage, but like, the heat moves are just garbage in this game compared to the second game. The combat, though, really is the same as Yakuza 2's, but a bit smoother. You see, as the games progress, the combat does get better and better, I will say, though. Now, Yakuza 3, in terms of what you'll be doing for missions, is helping out the orphanage or going after the Yakuza. Basically simple stuff, really. And yeah, that's really the only new stuff for the game when it comes to new stuff to the Yakuza game. It's also decently long. And this is where the Yakuza games start showing up. They start giving you some hours to play with, unlike the first two games that were about 10 hours, maybe. When it comes to presentation for Yakuza 3, I'm sorry, this game does not get the pass like Yakuza 2, since I don't like the art direction or style really that much in this game. This game, for 2010, this game just looks like crap. This game came out after Red Dead Redemption, and I know some people say, oh, that's not a fair comparison, this is budget. Okay, let's compare it to another SEGA game. Actually, two SEGA games. We can compare it to Sonic Unleashed, which came out 2 years prior, which looks way better. And we have Alien vs. Predator 2010, which also looks significantly better. We even have Resident Evil 5, which came out a year earlier, and like the comparisons just go on and on here. This game looks nowhere near as good as those games. The game just kind of looks like crap, to be honest. The animations honestly look like the same as Yakuza 1, or 2, which was 1. And I wouldn't be surprised if they are. Like with the old PS2 graphics, the animations didn't look awful, but with the new PS3 graphics using PS2 animations, they just look so stiff. The facial features and the animations, like for their faces, are great. I will say that. They're the only part of the graphics really that even look decent. But the textures, how everything looks, really it just does not look like a 2009 or 2010 game. It looks like a launch title for the PS3, honestly. The textures, environments, they just don't look very good at all. I mean, the game is detailed to an extent, but it still looks very outdated. The game is super rough around the edges, and it was so rough around the edges, I actually thought something was wrong with my TV. But no, it's the game. The game has really rough edges, and maybe I'm just used to my 1080 shit. The frame rate was fine, though, like, no problems there. The game, though, does not really look good, like, at all, even for the time. And I know the game had, like, a tiny budget and everything, but come on, even games from, like, 2007 look better than this. Like, the sound in this game is also a bit disappointing. The voice acting is in Japanese, so yeah, subtitles. I mean, there is a tiny bit of English in this game, actually, and it's awful. I mean awful. So I'm gonna just ignore that. The sound effects were decent, but they honestly just were not as good as the last twos. I mean, punching sounds okay, but like it's nowhere near as crunchy as I thought the second game was in terms of how it sounds. But the real kicker for the presentation, in my opinion, is the music. It's not fantastic. Really, like, it's not even great, really, or even okay, actually. The last two games, every single track, I will say, was amazing. And the game had like 20 songs each, and every single one was great. This game is like 30 or 40, maybe even like 50 tracks, and you know what? I can count on one hand how many I thought were good. Really, only a couple, which I was incredibly disappointed about. I mean, and the ones I can count on my hand, they're just okay. They're not even great. I mean, nothing's necessarily bad. It's just so generic sounding, and it does not sound like amazing like the first two. It's just okay, which is a real bummer for me, it is. The sound was just okay in general, not fantastic by any means. Speaking of not fantastic, I want to talk about the things I don't like about this game, aside from the presentation. I'm done shit talking on that. Now, first I will say though, if it feels like that I'm just shitting all over Yakuza 3, I probably am, but I will say that this is a good game.
あんたも本部の若頭補佐だ。何か喋ってくださいよ。アホくさ。
Like, it is a good game, but I will just say that there are some things off the bat that just don't sit well with me, and I'm done with graphics. But the heat moves in this game are just so lame. Like, they look nowhere near as cool. They don't do hella damage because they don't look as cool, and it irks me, really, it does. Now, the thing that really bothers me about Yakuza 3 is the story. The story is easily the worst in the franchise. Like, it's not awful or bad, it's just average, really. You see, the game starts off incredibly interesting and really awesome. Like, you have tons of questions, no answers, it's really interesting. But once you figure stuff out in the game, it just takes a big turn for the worse. And honestly, like, the second half, the plot just gets stupid. And it's just not really good. I mean, it's okay, I guess, but it's just not anywhere near as good as even the first half of the plot. The first half is much better, in my opinion, for Yakuza 3, and the second half was just really disappointing. And the game, I'll say, also has a lot of orphanage work. I'd say, seriously, like, half the game is orphanage work. And what starts out as, like, a cute little story mission, eventually just, like, it's like, please, just let me get on with the real story. I don't want to do this fucking orphanage work. And I mean, it's not terrible, but it gets old really quickly. And it just, like, it just kills my replayability for the game. Not that I would ever play the game again. I mean, kind of got rid of it. It's worth a lot of money now. And the game is actually decently long. A lot longer than Yakuza 2. Also, the game, in all honesty, it just blends in a bit to the whole Yakuza series. I mean, without a super big, awesome plot and not a very good lead villain at all, the game really just does kind of blend into the series. I honestly don't remember really anything about this game compared to 2 or even Yakuza 4. The combat is good, and the game is fun, the environments are nice. It's just the game kind of just, it feels like filler, honestly. There's a new chase mechanic, but that's pretty much it when it comes to new things at all. It's not a big deal even, really. Really, the thing is that I was just bummed out about the story, and it just made it feel like such an underwhelming experience, and it just kind of dampers everything, and the orphanage work just kind of slowed everything down. Yakuza 3, while I have only been talking about really negative stuff for Yakuza 3, I will still say it is a decent game. It's not great, but it just feels like a big step backwards to Yakuza 2, except the combat. While the combat, aside from the heat moves, I will say is a lot smoother and a lot better than Yakuza 2's, everything else just feels like a big step backwards from Yakuza 2. And luckily, this would be the only game to make such a big step backwards in the entire franchise, really. Well, main series. And in the end, I will say the game is just alright, but I definitely prefer Yakuza 2. And in the end, while I can recommend the game, I would say if you had to skip one, you could totally skip Yakuza 3, and it would not mean a damn thing, really. In the long run, it would barely mean anything. But it is worth checking out. If you like beat 'em ups, or if you played the first 2 Yakuza games, then yes, you do. You do want to go through Yakuza 3. And you could do worse. You could play through Yakuza 1 on PS2. Really, though, the game is just alright. So that wraps it up for my first part of the Yakuza games. That was Yakuza 1 through 3. In part 2 of the Yakuza series review, we're going to be covering Yakuza 4, 5, Dead Souls, and 0. So I'll see you guys then.